Economic Doctrines of the Capitalist Epoch. Bourgeois classical political economy emerged in opposition to feudalism, aiming to legitimize the capitalist system. William Petty, a founder of this school, began to define value based on labor, though not consistently. Physiocrats, led by François Quesnay, emphasized the importance of agriculture and the produit net, surplus product, as the source of wealth. They advocated for taxing landowners and free trade. Adam Smith, author of The Wealth of Nations, saw labor as the source of value across all industries. He described the class structure of capitalist society but also believed in a harmony of interests. David Ricardo, in On the Principles of Political Economy and Taxation, further refined the labor theory of value, highlighting the antagonism between wages and profit and rent. He saw these conflicts as natural laws. Ricardo's work, though insightful, was limited by its bourgeois perspective, accepting capitalism as eternal and failing to analyze the historical development of economic categories. Early socialists used Ricardo's labor theory of value to argue for workers' ownership of the means of production. The rise of vulgar political economy. As capitalism matured and class struggle intensified, classical political economy was replaced by a vulgar version focused on superficial appearances rather than scientific analysis. Marx's critique. Marx labeled this approach vulgar because it aimed to justify and defend capitalism, ignoring its contradictions. It prioritized what was useful to capital over objective truth. Rejection of the labor theory of value. Vulgar economists replaced the labor theory of value with flawed alternatives like supply and demand theory. This focused on price fluctuations without considering underlying value. Cost of production theory. This explained prices by referencing other prices, creating a circular argument. Utility theory. This attempted to explain value based on use value, ignoring the qualitative differences between commodities. Malthus's population theory blamed poverty on population growth exceeding resources, justifying inequality and suffering. Say's law falsely claimed that production creates its own demand, denying the possibility of overproduction and economic crises. Also promoted the three factors of production theory, land, labor, capital, to obscure the exploitation of labor. Bastiat and Carey propagated the illusion of harmony between classes in capitalism. Anti-labor stance. Vulgar economists opposed workers' organizations and collective action. Dominance of vulgar economics. By the mid-19th century, this apologetic approach became dominant in bourgeois economics. Petty bourgeois political economy. Emergence of petty bourgeois political economy. In the early 19th century, a new economic perspective arose, reflecting the interests and contradictions of the petty bourgeoisie, small business owners, artisans, etc. Sismondi's critique of capitalism. Unlike classical economists, Sismondi criticized capitalism from the viewpoint of the petty bourgeoisie. He idealized small-scale production and sought ways to preserve it, failing to recognize its inherent tendency to evolve into capitalism. Erroneous views on markets and accumulation. Sismondi wrongly believed that markets shrink with capitalist development and that capital accumulation depends on small producers and foreign markets. Proudhon's utopian schemes advocated for a system of exchange without money and free credit for workers, fostering reformist illusions and diverting workers from class struggle. Influence in Russia. In late 19th century Russia, the Narodniks, populists, embraced petty bourgeois economic ideas, opposing capitalist development and idealizing peasant communities. This trend in political economy highlights the challenges faced by the petty bourgeoisie under capitalism. Caught between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, they often yearn for a romanticized past or seek unrealistic solutions to avoid being absorbed into the capitalist system. The utopian socialists' rise of utopian socialism. The emergence of large-scale industry in the late 18th and early 19th centuries exposed the harsh realities and contradictions of capitalism. This led to the rise of utopian socialists like Saint-Simon, Fourier, and Owen. Critique of capitalism. While still influenced by Enlightenment philosophy, utopian socialists condemned capitalism for its negative social consequences, such as poverty, exploitation, and waste. They envisioned a socialist system as a more just and humane alternative. Limitations of utopian socialism: lack of scientific understanding. They did not grasp the laws of social development and class struggle. Reliance on persuasion. They believed socialism could be achieved by convincing the ruling class of its merits. Ignorance of the proletariat's role. They failed to recognize the working class as the driving force for social change. Historical significance. Despite their limitations, utopian socialists played a crucial role in the development of socialist thought by providing a powerful critique of capitalism, offering glimpses of a future socialist society, inspiring later socialist thinkers and movements. Essentially, utopian socialists identified the problems of capitalism and imagined a better future, but they lacked a concrete understanding of how to achieve that future. Their idealism paved the way for the scientific socialism of Marx and Engels, which provided a more rigorous analysis of capitalism and a strategy for revolutionary change. The revolutionary Democrats in Russia. Russian thinkers amidst the serfdom crisis. In the mid-19th century, as Russia grappled with the crisis of serfdom, a group of remarkable thinkers emerged, contributing significantly to economic thought. Herzen's critique of Tsarism and capitalism. Herzen condemned both Russian serfdom and Western capitalism, advocating for revolutionary change. He championed a utopian peasant socialism based on communal land ownership, reflecting the aspirations of the peasantry. Chernyshevsky's contributions. Chernyshevsky, a leading revolutionary Democrat, provided a profound critique of both serfdom and capitalism. He exposed the flaws of classical and vulgar political economy, advocating for a political economy of the working people centered on labor. Chernyshevsky's insights and limitations. Advanced understanding. He surpassed Western utopian socialists in his grasp of capitalist society, class structure, and economic development. Emphasis on revolution. He stressed the importance of revolutionary struggle by the working class. Utopian elements. Due to Russia's underdevelopment, he did not foresee the role of capitalism in creating the conditions for socialism. Chernyshevsky's legacy. His economic teachings represented a high point in pre-Marxian political economy. He was a materialist and came close to dialectical materialism. Forerunners of social democracy. Herzen, Chernyshevsky, and their followers laid the intellectual groundwork for the Russian social democratic movement. This period in Russian intellectual history demonstrates a critical engagement with both the feudal system at home and the emerging capitalist system in the West. These thinkers provided a unique perspective on economic and social issues, paving the way for the development of socialist ideas in Russia. The revolutionary transformation in political economy effected by K. Marx and F. Engels. The rise of scientific socialism. By the mid-19th century, capitalism was firmly established, and the working class had emerged as a distinct social force. This set the stage for the development of scientific socialism by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Marx and Engels' contribution. They transformed socialist thought from utopian aspirations into a scientific analysis of capitalism and its inevitable trajectory towards revolution. Their ideas championed the working class and provided a theoretical foundation for their struggle against capitalism. Building on previous thinkers. Marx's genius lay in synthesizing and advancing the ideas of earlier philosophers, economists, and socialists. He provided answers to long-standing questions about human society and its development. Revolutionary transformation in thought. Marxism revolutionized philosophy, political economy, and social sciences by introducing dialectical materialism, a comprehensive worldview that emphasizes the interconnectedness and constant change of reality. Historical materialism, a method for analyzing history through the lens of material conditions, class struggle, and modes of production. Scientific political economy. Marx applied dialectical materialism to economics, exposing the contradictions of capitalism and creating a proletarian political economy. He built upon and critiqued classical economists like Smith and Ricardo, while rejecting bourgeois apologetic. Key tenets of Marx's economic theory. Labor theory of value. Value is determined by the socially necessary labor time required to produce a commodity. Surplus value. The source of capitalist profit is the unpaid labor of workers. Exploitation. Capitalists extract surplus value by paying workers less than the value they create. Class struggle. The inherent conflict between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat drives historical change. Major works of Marx and Engels. The Communist Manifesto, a foundational text outlining the principles of communism and calling for proletarian revolution. Capital, Marx's magnum opus, providing a comprehensive analysis of capitalist production, circulation, and exploitation. Other works by Engels. Engels contributed significantly to Marxist theory through works like The Condition of the Working Class in England, Anti-Düring, and The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. Price of production and average profit. Marx resolved the apparent contradiction between market prices and values by introducing the concept of price of production, which accounts for the tendency of profit rates to equalize across industries. This also revealed the basis for capitalist class solidarity, as their profits are interconnected. Rent theory. Marx developed a comprehensive theory of rent, including both differential rent, arising from differences in land fertility, and absolute rent, based on the monopoly ownership of land. He exposed the exploitative nature of landlordism. Laws of capital accumulation. Marx discovered the inherent laws driving capital accumulation, including the concentration and centralization of capital. He showed how this process leads to intensified contradictions. The conflict between the social nature of production and private appropriation becomes more acute. Growing inequality. Wealth concentrates at one pole of society while poverty and exploitation increase at the other. Impoverishment of the proletariat. Both relative and absolute impoverishment of the working class occurs, exacerbating class struggle. Reproduction of social capital. Marx analyzed the reproduction of the entire capitalist system, correcting Smith's errors and establishing the division of the social product into its value components, C plus V plus S, and material form, means of production and consumer goods. This led him to discover the general law of economic development, the faster growth of production of means of production compared to consumer goods. Crises of overproduction. Marx analyzed the conditions for simple and expanded capitalist reproduction, demonstrating the inevitability of crises under capitalism due to the contradictions in the realization of surplus value. The downfall of capitalism. Marx and Engels' economic teachings provided a comprehensive argument for the inevitable collapse of capitalism and the triumph of the proletarian revolution, leading to the dictatorship of the proletariat and the construction of socialism. Spread of Marxism. In the late 19th century, Marxism gained traction among the working class and intellectuals, thanks to figures like Lafargue, Liebknecht, Bebel, Plekhanov, and Blagoev. Marxism in Russia. The development of Marxism in Russia involved a struggle against opposing ideologies like Narodism, which denied the role of the proletariat and the possibility of capitalist development in Russia. Plekhanov played a crucial role in defending and popularizing Marxism, although he had some limitations that later led to Menshevik views. Lenin ultimately completed the task of defeating Narodism and uniting Marxism with the Russian working-class movement. The further degeneration of bourgeois economic science. Present-day bourgeois political economy. Bourgeois economists' primary task. Since the emergence of Marxism, bourgeois economists have focused their efforts on refuting it, employing various idealistic and subjective approaches to counter Marx's materialist analysis. The historical school. This German school, prominent in the mid-19th century, denied the existence of economic laws and focused on describing historical facts. This approach served to justify reactionary policies and support the existing state apparatus. Later, the historical school shifted towards historico-ethical and historico-legal approaches, emphasizing moral and legal factors over economic analysis. Some, like those in the Social Policy League, advocated for minor reforms to prevent radical change, earning the label Kathedersocialismus, socialism of the professorial chair. The Austrian school. This school, led by Menger, Wieser, and Bohm-Bawerk, emerged in the late 19th century. While acknowledging the existence of economic laws, they sought to explain them through subjective psychology, focusing on individual preferences and marginal utility. They rejected Marx's theory of surplus value and offered variations of the productivity of capital theory. Degradation of bourgeois economics under imperialism. The rise of imperialism and intensified class struggle led to further decline in bourgeois economics. After the Russian Revolution, Many bourgeois economists focused on discrediting the Soviet Union and distorting its achievements. Modern bourgeois economics. Contemporary bourgeois economists often adopt subjective psychological approaches, rehashing old theories like the three factors of production. They often advocate for state intervention in the economy, portraying it as a neutral force capable of planning and managing capitalism. This serves to mask the reality of state support for monopolies and the intensification of production anarchy. Eclecticism and apologetic. Economists like Alfred Marshall and John Bates Clark attempted to reconcile different vulgar theories of value and promote the illusion of class harmony. They portray profit as a reward for the employer's work, downplaying the exploitation of labor. The social trend. This school, prevalent in early 20th century Germany, focused on social relations but interpreted them idealistically as legal forms devoid of material content. They emphasized ethical norms and the subordination of individual interests to the common welfare, ultimately serving the interests of capitalist monopolies. This trend provided ideological ammunition for fascism. Fascist economics. Fascism utilized the most reactionary elements of bourgeois economics, including extreme nationalism, state worship, and the suppression of class struggle. They employed anti-capitalist demagoguery while serving the interests of monopolies and justifying imperialist aggression through racist ideologies like the race theory and the theory of living space. Keynesianism, John Maynard Keynes' theory, prominent since the 1930s, attributes economic crises and unemployment to insufficient demand. He proposes state intervention to stimulate demand through increased government spending, even if it leads to budget deficits. This approach aims to manage capitalism, not overthrow it. Critique of Keynesianism. Marxist economists argue that Keynesianism fails to address the root causes of capitalist crises, which lie in the contradictions of the capitalist system itself. They criticize Keynesian policies for ultimately benefiting the capitalist class at the expense of workers. Regulation of the economy. Some bourgeois economists, particularly in the U.S., advocate for increased state intervention to regulate the economy and mitigate crises. This often involves government spending on military production and infrastructure projects, which serves the interests of monopolies. Militarization of the economy. The idea that military spending can prevent economic crises is a common theme in bourgeois economics. However, Marxists argue that militarization only temporarily postpones crises and ultimately exacerbates the contradictions of capitalism. Free market rhetoric. Other bourgeois economists advocate for free markets, which in practice means unrestricted freedom for monopolies to exploit workers and consumers. They oppose trade unions and labor protections, portraying them as obstacles to economic freedom. Justifications for imperialism. Some bourgeois economists use racist and pseudoscientific theories to justify imperialist aggression and the exploitation of other nations. They promote the idea of a world state dominated by the U.S., undermining national sovereignty and resistance to American imperialism. War propaganda. Many bourgeois economists actively promote war as a natural and inevitable phenomenon, advocating for increased military spending and hostility towards socialist countries. Malthusianism. Modern Malthusians combine population control with racist ideologies, blaming poverty and resource scarcity on overpopulation and advocating for drastic measures, including war and mass annihilation. Petty bourgeois critiques of imperialism. Petty bourgeois economists often criticize monopolies and advocate for a return to free market capitalism. They propose reforms to protect small businesses and improve the position of workers, but ultimately fail to challenge the capitalist system itself. Role in the democratic movement. Despite their limitations, petty bourgeois economists can play a role in the democratic movement against imperialism, war, and the dominance of monopolies. They often express the discontent of the petty bourgeoisie and advocate for national sovereignty and peace. The economic theories of the opportunists of the Second International and the right-wing socialists of today. Revisionism. Beginning in the 1890s, revisionists like Bernstein sought to improve Marxism by rejecting its revolutionary core. They denied the inevitability of capitalism's downfall, the need for the dictatorship of the proletariat, and key tenets of Marx's economic theory. Legal Marxists and economists. In Russia, Revisionist ideas were echoed by legal Marxists and economists who sought to reconcile Marxism with bourgeois interests. Kautsky and Hilferding. Initially contributing to Marxist thought, Kautsky and Hilferding later distorted it. They downplayed the contradictions of monopoly capitalism, rejected the dictatorship of the proletariat, and promoted illusions of peaceful capitalist evolution into socialism. Ultra-imperialism and productive forces. Kautsky's theories of ultra-imperialism and the automatic development of productive forces served to whitewash imperialism and disarm the working class. Organized capitalism and economic democracy. Hilferding and other reformists embraced the idea of a crisis-free capitalism managed by monopolies, leading to the illusion that socialism would arise peacefully through cooperation with capitalists. Post-World War II reformism. Right-wing socialist leaders after World War II, like Blum and Renner, became defenders of capitalism, promoting democratic socialism and nationalization as solutions while ignoring the continued dominance of the bourgeoisie. Democratic socialism. This theory falsely claims that exploitation and class antagonism have disappeared in advanced capitalist countries, portraying the state as above classes and nationalized industries as socialist. Communist and workers' parties. These parties actively combat the apologetic theories of bourgeois economists and right-wing socialists, upholding the principles of Marxism-Leninism. Growing support for Marxism. Despite these attacks, Marxism-Leninism continues to gain support among progressive intellectuals worldwide who recognize its explanatory power in understanding the contradictions and crises of contemporary capitalism. The development of the Marxist political economy of capitalism by V.I. Lenin. The working out of a number of new propositions in the political economy of capitalism by J.V. Stalin. Lenin's contributions. Lenin built upon Marx and Engels' work, defending it against revisionists and adapting it to the new era of imperialism. He enriched Marxist theory by analyzing the specific conditions of Russian capitalism and the global transition to monopoly capitalism. Early works. In the 1890s, Lenin refuted both the Narodniks, who denied capitalist development in Russia, and the legal Marxists, who downplayed its contradictions. His work, The Development of Capitalism in Russia, provided a detailed analysis of the Russian economy and class struggle. Capitalist reproduction. Lenin elaborated on Marxist theory of capitalist reproduction, showing how capitalism creates its own market and highlighting the inherent contradictions leading to crises and the impoverishment of the proletariat. Agrarian question. Lenin deepened Marx's analysis of capitalism in agriculture, showing the specific ways it impacted the peasantry and the need for an alliance between the working class and peasantry in the revolution. He also addressed the issue of land nationalization. Defense of materialism. In Materialism and Empirio-Criticism, Lenin defended dialectical materialism against idealist and revisionist attacks, reaffirming the philosophical foundation of Marxism. Theory of imperialism. Lenin's groundbreaking work, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, analyzed the economic and political features of this new stage, characterized by monopoly domination, the rise of finance capital, and heightened international contradictions leading to war and revolution. State monopoly capitalism. Lenin explored the growing fusion of state and monopoly power, highlighting its role in intensifying exploitation and as a potential stepping stone towards socialism. Uneven development and socialist revolution. Lenin's theory of uneven development explained the possibility of socialism succeeding first in one or a few countries, paving the way for the October Revolution in Russia. General crisis of capitalism. Lenin identified the era of World War I as the beginning of capitalism's general crisis, marked by heightened contradictions and the potential for socialist revolutions. Struggle against opportunism. Lenin consistently fought against opportunism within the socialist movement, exposing its theoretical flaws and its role in undermining the revolutionary struggle. He linked opportunism to the material privileges enjoyed by a labor aristocracy bribed by the bourgeoisie. Stalin's contributions. Stalin built upon the foundations laid by Marx, Engels, and Lenin, further developing Marxist-Leninist political economy by incorporating the experiences of the Soviet Union and the global communist movement. Aggravation of capitalist contradictions. Stalin emphasized the inherent instability of capitalism, arguing against reformist claims that its contradictions could be mitigated. He predicted the intensification of these contradictions, ultimately leading to capitalism's demise. Agrarian question. Stalin refuted the idea of a stable small peasantry under capitalism, highlighting the necessity of abolishing capitalist exploitation to alleviate rural poverty. He stressed the importance of the peasantry as a revolutionary ally of the working class. National question. Stalin elaborated on the economic factors contributing to the formation of nations and national states, emphasizing the role of a common economic life and market. He analyzed the specific historical conditions of nation-state formation in both the West and the East. Defense of Leninism. Stalin and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union defended Lenin's theory of socialist revolution, particularly the possibility of building socialism in one country, against internal opposition, Trotskyists, Bukharinists, and external critics. Imperialism and the general crisis of capitalism. Stalin expanded on Lenin's analysis of imperialism, formulating the basic economic law of modern capitalism and highlighting the features of its general crisis, including the intensification of market problems, chronic undercapacity, and mass unemployment. He also emphasized the two stages of this crisis, marked by the two world wars and the rise of socialist states. Critique of bourgeois economics and reformism. Stalin exposed the inability of bourgeois economists and reformists to address the fundamental problems of capitalism. He criticized their attempts to portray state intervention as a solution and their apologetic for fascism. Guide to action. Stalin emphasized the practical importance of Marxist-Leninist political economy as a tool for understanding and transforming the world. It serves as a guide for communist and workers' parties in their struggle for socialism and the liberation of working people from capitalist exploitation.